Hello guys, welcome to HL Bio lesson 27, and today we're looking at the importance and the properties of water for living things. This relates to textbooks or syllabus section 2.2. The essential idea for today is very simple, that water is the medium for life. It is the place where all of the important biochemical and metabolic reactions occur. Quite simply, life is not possible without water. Water is the solvent of life. A solvent, in this case water, is the substance in which solutes, for example salt and glucose, are dissolved to make a solution. Solvent, solutes, solution. Water is inside the cell in the cytoplasm and also outside the cell in the intercellular fluid or even in the environment in fresh water or in the oceans. If water is the solvent, then the resulting solution is called an aqueous solution. So an example of this, of course, is cytoplasm or the oceans or even the blood in our capillaries. Now, our first understanding, water molecules are polar and hydrogen bonds form between them. On the left-hand side, we'll talk about the bonding within an individual water molecule, and on the right-hand side, we'll talk about the interactions between different water molecules. Covalent bonds form between the hydrogen and oxygen atoms in water molecules. Covalent bonds mean that the two hydrogen atoms and also the oxygen atom share electrons. These are polar covalent bonds. There is actually an unequal sharing of electrons, with the one oxygen being bonded to two hydrogens. This results in the oxygen end of the water molecule becoming slightly negative and the hydrogen end of the water molecule being slightly positive. This is what we call polar. We can see in this diagram, particularly I think on the left-hand side there, an individual water molecule with the slightly negative oxygen, the slightly positive hydrogens, and the polar covalent bonds forming between them. So we've seen that water is therefore a polar molecule. We say it has dipolarity, different charges at each end. Water molecules, because of this, interact with each other and other charged molecules, positive or negative ions, in interesting ways. Now these are generally short-lived or ephemeral attractions called hydrogen bonds. And we can see this nicely demonstrated here with the slightly negative oxygen on the left-hand molecule being attracted to the slightly positive hydrogen atoms on the right-hand molecule, creating this ephemeral hydrogen bond. Now these hydrogen bonds and dipolarity help to explain why water has such amazing properties which are essential for life. And you need to know about 4 of them in particular. Okay, dipolarity, hydrogen bonds, lots of properties essential for life. The first one being cohesive properties. When molecules of the same type are attracted to each other. The key phrase there, the same type. In water, the positive end of one water molecule is attracted to the negative end of another. This is what we term, as I said, hydrogen bonding. Freezing, interestingly enough, is actually when these hydrogen bonds lock into place as the temperature drops. However, in liquid water, we normally get these ephemeral, short-lived hydrogen bonds influencing each other and allowing for the following effects. First of all, our characteristic water droplets, this round shape, is formed because of these hydrogen bonds. And relating directly to life, and an example you can use is the surface tension of water formed by these hydrogen bonds actually allows for certain creatures, such as this wasp, to be able to support its own weight on water. Pretty amazing. Secondly, let's have a look at the adhesive properties. Now, this is similar to cohesive, but it relates to any attraction between two unlike polar molecules. For example, a water molecule and a cellulose molecule in a plant cell wall. So in the diagram on the left-hand side here, the enlarged section, the circular section, we can see cohesion between two water molecules, but we can also see adhesion between the cell wall and also a water molecule. Transpiration, which we'll learn a lot more about later, is the movement of water from the roots to the leaves through the xylem. Water is pulled up the xylem in a long column because of two forces. The first is the cohesion between water molecules, helping them to stick together, and also the adhesion of this water column to the cell wall, helping it to, again, stick together and get pulled up the plant. We'll do much more on transpiration later, so as long as you understand these two properties at the moment, that's fine. That's all we need to know at the moment. Okay, thermal properties are also really critical to life. The first is that water has high specific heat capacity, which essentially means it can absorb or give off a great deal of heat without changing temperature very much. This means that it's a really good temperature stabilizer. An example of this would be a lake, an alpine lake, where the external temperature fluctuates a lot, but the actual temperature within the lake of the water doesn't change very much at all. This is similar to our bodies, where even though we might exist in temperatures which change a lot outside our body, the internal cells and so forth do not change very much. This is really important for homeostasis. Water also has a high heat of vaporization. It can absorb a great deal of heat when it evaporates. Now, living things use this as a cooling mechanism. So for example, it might be sweating if we're running, or you might see your dog panting on a hot day. And this evaporation helps us to cool down. As we've seen, water is also a great solvent. It acts as a solvent for polar molecules, for example, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids, some of our macromolecules. And because of this, water acts as the medium for many biochemical reactions. So you might think of cellular respiration or photosynthesis happening in water environments, aqueous solutions. The body contains many fluids. Most are aqueous solutions with various polar substances dissolved in water. Interestingly, lipids do not dissolve in water as they are non-polar, and we'll look at this in more detail soon. Table 2.3 is an important one. It highlights some common aqueous solutions in the body, for example, cytoplasm or blood plasma. Obviously shows the location and common reactions that take place in those solutions. So please take note of that. Because of its solvent properties, water also is a fantastic transport medium. In animals, as you might expect, our transport medium is blood. Blood's composed of our platelets and our white and red blood cells, but also this watery solution, blood plasma, which essentially is water with dissolved glucose, amino acids, fibrinogen, and also CO2. In plants, xylem cells carry water with dissolved minerals from the roots to the leaves during transpiration, as we've seen, and the phloem cells contain dissolved sugars, the products of photosynthesis, and it transports these from the leaves to stems, roots, flowers, and other parts of the plant. Again, we'll be looking in great detail at plant biology, so as long as you know these basic facts at the moment, that's fine. Okay, moving on. Another key understanding in this topic is that substances can be hydrophilic or hydrophobic. Hydrophilic substances are what we term water-loving. This includes water itself and also other polar substances. Most of the biochemically important molecules are polar and hydrophilic and can therefore dissolve easily in water. Polar solvents dissolve polar solutes. This is because polar molecules generally contain, or they do contain, functional group which makes them polar. For example, carbohydrates contain lots of OHs, which are hydroxyl or alcohol groups. So if we look back at the structure of glucose, we can see there are lots of OH groups here, making glucose polar and making sure or ensuring that it can dissolve easily in water. Hydrophobic means water-fearing. They are generally organic, non-polar substances. Now these are generally molecules which contain only or large sections of carbon and hydrogen. Examples we have seen already, fatty acids in triglycerides, and an example we'll look at a lot more detail in phospholipids in membranes. Here's our fatty acid, and as you can see, a large section of only carbons and hydrogen. We will be looking at this in a lot more detail, but I just thought it'd be interesting to look at a phospholipid now. So we can see it's quite similar to a triglyceride, but it has this phosphate head, which is actually polar or hydrophilic. And at the other end, we have these two non-polar fatty acid chains, a hydrophobic end. If we were to look at a membrane, a very simple diagram of a membrane, we have our extracellular fluid, which is a water environment on one side. We have our intracellular fluid, which is the cytoplasm on the other. And we have this phospholipid bilayer separating the two. The polar heads facing the water environment and the hydrophobic tails moving away from the water and creating this barrier in between. And this leads to essentially our cells. So we can see that we have this separation of the inside from the outside environment. And this makes all of our biochemical reactions possible, this compartmentalization. We'll look at this in a lot more detail soon. Within the membrane, this is not super clear, this diagram, but I really like it, so I included it. Proteins are a special case because they may contain some sections that are hydrophobic and others that are hydrophilic. This is because some of the amino acid R groups, those special changeable or variable regions, are polar and others are non-polar. The cell membrane actually has proteins embedded into it and actually through the membrane. The sections that are within the interior of the membrane are actually hydrophobic. You can see that here in the orange box. And the sections outside or inside the cell within these aqueous solutions are hydrophilic because of their R groups. Okay, the final application, I'll just leave this with you. We need to look at this table 2.4, which shows the polarity of different molecules. And what this table is essentially doing is summarizing the relative polarity of some key molecules, and it shows whether they dissolve easily and can be moved in the blood, or whether they don't dissolve and they need some sort of special mode of transport or an alternate mode of transport. We can see at the top glucose amino acids, they're fine, they're polar, they have high solubility, they can be transported very easily in the blood. And we can also see down the bottom, sodium chloride is something similar. These three though, cholesterol, fats and oxygen, they are either non-polar or they have low solubility, and therefore we need to consider these as special cases. So please take your time to look at that table, it's quite important moving forward. And yes, I am a Lord of the Rings nerd. It's finished, it's done. You have done your second lesson in a blended classroom style. Okay, go back over, take notes, enjoy, and I'll see you in class.